Morning, everybody, and welcome back to our virtual classroom. Here is our topic and learning intention for today's lesson. I decided to stop writing the date that I film on and instead just put date, and you can write in the date that you actually do the lesson. So for today's math lesson, we're finding fractions of an amount. The learning intention: I can use my knowledge of equivalent fractions to find fractions of an amount. What does that mean? Well, let's say, for example, that someone had 8 apples and they're going to eat 3/4 of them. How much is that? Well, let's find out. So here's that problem I was talking about. If you have a good memory, you'll realize that this problem actually is from your work last week when you had to shade in 0.75 of 8. Well, 0.75 is the same thing as 3/4. How do I find 3/4 of 8? Well, I could go about it a couple ways. The first, I could say, let me take the 8 apples and split it into 4 groups. I'm gonna go ahead, split it in half, and then split it down the middle again. So I've split it into quarters because my denominator tells me I need 4 equal groups. 1, 2, 3, 4 equal groups. Each group has 2 apples. If I take 3 of the groups, because remember I'm looking for 3/4, let me go ahead and shade in all the apples that are part of 3 of the 4 groups. I'm just going to do a little shading because I can't really see properly. Let's see, let me do this over here. They're going to be orange apples. I know that's not a real thing, but I don't have a red highlighter. I suppose I could have made them yellow or green, but I wasn't thinking about that. There we go. So I've shaded in 3 out of the 4 groups. How many apples are shaded? 6. So 3/4 of 8 is 6. There's another way I could have done it, because if you have a really big number, it's not going to be realistic to draw out that really big number and then split it into groups. So I could use my knowledge of equivalent fractions instead. So here's 3/4. And when I think of 3/4, it makes it seem as though the whole is made up of 4 parts, like 4 apples instead of 8. So what I can do instead, so that I can find what 3/4 of 8 is, I can change that denominator so that my group is made up of 8 pieces or 8 apples instead of 4. How do I get from 4 to 8? Well, 4 times 2 equals 8. So to find out how many of my apples would be shaded, I need to do the same thing to my numerator. 3 times 2 equals 6. And there's my answer again. But here's the key thing. When you do it like this, your answer isn't 6/8, because I'm trying to find 3/4 of 8 apples. My answer isn't 6/8 apples. My answer is just 6 apples. So when you use the strategy of going for equivalent fractions, you have to remember your answer is just your numerator. So here, my answer is not 6/8, it's 6 apples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here, my answer, it's not 6/8, it's just the 6, because we want to find out what part is shaded. And the part that is shaded is 6. Well, let's consider a few more examples. I'm going to zoom in on the first one. If I had to find 1/3 of 27, I could draw 27 dots, or I could make my life a whole lot easier and do this instead. I'll say, okay, I'm looking for 1/3, but instead of my denominator being 3, I want my denominator to be 27 because I have 27 pieces. So I need to find 1/3 of 27. How do I get from 3 to 27? Well, I multiply by 9. If you know your times tables, trust me, this is a whole lot easier. Now, since I've multiplied the bottom by 9, I need to do the same thing to the top. Times 9. 1 times 9 is 9. So that means 1/3 of 27 is 9. Not 9 27s. My answer is just 9. This is so important. Do not get tricked into thinking your answer, because 9 27s is the same thing as a third. A third of 27 is not a third. A third of 27 is 9. So it's so important that when you do this part, you should highlight that your answer is what the numerator is by itself. We'll look at an illustration of that in a moment. Let's try another one. 2 7s of 56. Well, same strategy. 2 7s, but instead I want my denominator to be 56. How do I get from 7 to 56? Well, if I know my times tables, which I should, multiply by 8. so I need to do the same thing to the top. Once you get the swing of this, you won't need to do the arrows all the time. 2 times 8, 16. My answer, 16. Not 16 over 56, just 16. 16 pieces is 2/7 of 56. Next one. 4/10 of 30. I'm gonna give myself a new denominator and make it 30 because I want to find out what 4/10 of 30 is. So 10 to 30, I have to multiply by 3. So I'm going to do the same thing to the top. 4 times 3 is 12. My answer, 12. 12 pieces is 4/10 of 30. One more. 5/9 of 900. Don't get stumped because the number is so big. It's actually quite simple. How do I get from 9 to 900? Just multiply by 100. So 9 times 100 is 900. So 5 times 100 is 500. 5/9 of 900 is 500. So I make sure I write my final answer off to the side, underline it. So earlier I said it's really important that you write your final answer as a whole number and not as a fraction. Here's why. In this situation, we're looking for 2/3 of 6, in this case 6 candies. So here I have 6 candies and I need to find 2/3 of them. Well, I could split them into 3 equal groups. As you can see, I've already done 1, 2, 3 groups, and then find 2 of those groups. Or I can also do my equivalent fraction method, where I find what 2/3 is equal to if I change the denominator to 6. To get from 3 to 6, I just double, so I do the same to the top. 2 times 2 is 4. Now, I can see here clearly that my answer is 4 candies, because I have 3 groups, 1, 2, and 3. And if I pick 2 of the groups, as I'm told to, 2 of the 3 groups, 1, 2 groups, it's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I left my answer as 4/6, and I say the answer to 2/3 of 6 candies is 4/6 candy, this is what I would actually mean. That means that I'm taking a single candy and splitting it into 6 pieces. And then I take 4 of them. This is not the same as this. 2/3 of 6 whole candies is 4 whole candies, not 4/6 of 1 candy. So my answer should be written as 4, the whole number 4. In this case, 4 candies, so I'll even write candies off to the side. That is why it's so important that your final answer is written as a whole number and not as a fraction.